Hey, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are filming episode 4 of the epic rescue of the search and rescue utility boat. This is one of the first episodes where I've actually, I've been a little bit nervous. We're going to be installing the structure for the subfloor. But before we go any further, I want to make sure that I address two things. The first, I am not an expert. I've never done this before. Make sure that you're thinking of it as how this guy did this thing, not a how you should do your thing. Second, I need to say thank you. Everybody that you see showing up on this list right here is somebody who has published a video that has helped me to understand exactly what it is that I'm trying to achieve here. I'm gonna put channel links to each of their pages up in the description. Thank you, thank you, thank you for putting this stuff out there, learning the lessons, going through the hardships, trying to set it up so that people like me don't have to learn things the hard way. The first major challenge that we're facing is figuring out exactly how much space we actually want to have to work with. The subfloor does a lot of different things for us, not the least of which is setting the base from which everything else is going to get built. So you got to put a lot of thought into thinking about exactly how you want that thing to lay out. You may recall a couple of episodes back, I removed the center seat, thinking that if I gave myself 6 feet, it would be plenty of space for me to put the subfloor in. And I could basically leave everything alone so that these two front benches would establish a space for a platform, and then I could figure out what I was going to do off the back. Turns out that's a bad idea. The easiest way for me to demonstrate it is to take this broomstick, a straight line, and lay it across the benches. Now, if we look at how this is laying across here, it seems like it's probably okay, but it's not. You see, I've got this significant gap here, and I've got this significant gap here. That's because this bench is installed at a different angle than this bench. Now, I don't know why they did it like that. It may have been within tolerance, but it's going to wreak havoc on us when we go to install things later on. Now, I like the idea of keeping that front bench in place because that gives me a lot of structural integrity right on the bow of the boat, right where it's going to be taking significant abuse. But I don't like the idea of this bench being here, and I don't like the idea of that bench being here. So the first thing that we have to do is get these out. And we're going to follow the same process that we did in the previous episode where we removed these bench seats. All of that is now opened up. This is a 14-foot boat, an Alumacraft T-14S. Now we got to figure out exactly where we want to have our line for the subfloor. Now, one of the issues that we know for sure we're going to have with this boat is weight distribution. We've got a 30 horsepower Tohatsu that's going to sit off the back, and I'm not exactly a skinny dude. And when I've been out in it, sitting in the back, it's way, way, way too back heavy. This nose is way up here. So we know that we're going to try to build in as much storage space towards the front for our 2 deep cycle marine batteries, and also, if possible, our fuel tank. But before we get into any of that stuff, we got to start thinking about how high off the deck we want the subfloor to be. And we also have to think about what line that needs to take. I think what I want to do is have my subfloor match the plane of the top of the gunnel. So in order to make that happen, and I'm kind of riffing here, we're going to get out a level. My nose is up. I'm going to lower the level of the trailer until I get a good reading for level here to make sure that whatever I install here is going to be parallel as opposed to sitting cattywampus. Okay, so we are looking pretty good from the stern to the bow. We got to check to see how it is going side to side. Okay, so we are generally level also from side to side. This is the setting. This is the trailer must now not move. So the next thing we got to do is get some sense of exactly how much floor we're planning on working with. The general idea is that we want to have something rest on this last gusset, run all the way up to the front, and that's going to give us a straight line that is about the length that we want the entire subfloor to be. Then we can raise that flat surface up until we know that it is exactly parallel with the top of the gunnels. From the front of the very first gusset to the very back of the last gusset before it hits that transom structure is 118 1/4 inches. Strike that, it's 118 1/2. Now we need something that's going to give us a straight edge that'll run that whole 118 1/2 inches. And for that, we're going to use angled aluminum. Okay, I made a couple mistakes getting here, but we've got the very back structure in. Main mistake, I secured that side. I didn't go tight edge to edge. I left a little gap here, and as a result of that, I didn't have enough surface to actually screw into, and I had to go into the top. Now, I don't think that's gonna matter in the long run. This is gonna form my base. It's gonna give me level all the way forward. So I'm gonna figure out the length that the support beam needs to be cut to. All right, so we got our base piece, and we got a structure piece, right? And it's gonna fit up underneath. Still a little proud. Wow.
Do it again.
All right. Close enough. Well, it's 6 3/4. Now, is that going to be strong enough? I sure hope so. So we're resting all the way down yonder, and we're just looking at the base of that piece of angle to establish our level line. And we're pretty close to where we want to be. Then I got to figure out what the delta is across there. Edge to edge. Let's find out. I don't know if it makes sense to do this, but we're experimenting. So I'm going to clamp this together. I'm going to pre-drill my holes on the angle. Man, that's some thick stuff. So that front cross member is in. This is a total pain, but now that these two are there, at least we've got our plane to work with. I'll show you more in a second, but we are level from left to right, and we have no wiggle room. There's no, like it would teeter-totter if it was really out of spec. Let's square it up. All right, so we skipped ahead a bit because it took me a little while to figure out exactly how to run this center line. This is one of those situations where I think having bought longer lengths of aluminum really helped me out. I went with 16 foot. Didn't cost me any money to have it cut. That's how it came. It was a little difficult to go and get, but it's paying dividends because having that long 120-inch run down the middle really helped me out. Let me show you exactly how I did this. So the really tricky bit here has to do with the way that the angle is going to lay after you're done. In this case, I want to get it as close to symmetrical as I can get it. So we'll take our measurement from this side, and we're looking at about 17 5/8. So we'll go that same distance on this side, mark 17 5/8. And to do this, you need a combination square and like a permanent marker, probably a couple clamps. So I'm going to lay this out like so, knowing that when I'm done, I'm going to flip it this way so that the flat side is up. It doesn't have to be like crazy precise, but you know, you're just going to mark the portions that you know you want to get rid of. All we're going to do is remove a tab so that we've got a flap that sticks out this way, which is what ends up mounting to here, to your back. You want this to be at 90 degrees. Now, we're not cutting anything yet, but we are going to take a sanity measurement. We're at a little over 12 1/4 here, which means it should be a little over 12 1/4 on that far side. Right on there. This is the tricky part, making sure that we're removing the same portions so we have these same flaps
So the portions that are going to be removed, this is going to be your tab, and then everything after this line gets cut off completely. Okay, so there you have it. These are the front and back limits of what my subfloor is going to be. And I think I'm going to do a support on every one of these larger gussets. I'm not going to so much worry about these smaller ones because it's 1/8. I think it'll be just fine. Let's see what happens. Good morning. It is day 2 of trying to do the framing. This is as good a time as any to talk about primary lessons learned. Number 1, this is hard work. Like, you watch these videos and it seems like it's so easy. It's not. It's backbreaking. And there are some things that are happening here that are contributing to that. Namely, I'm using 1/8" aluminum for everything. I suppose it would be possible to cut this 1/8" with like snips, but you know, I've got strong hands. You could maybe do a handful of cuts throughout the course of the day, but it's the kind of thing that you require a saw to do anything with. Tools that have definitely come in handy. The putting the metal saw blade on that miter saw, awesome. It just right through it, just like butter. Having proper metal blades on a small jigsaw, that definitely helps. Another thing that I'm learning as I go through this is the angles that you have to deal with. You really have to think about how you're attaching things, and you have to anticipate leaving yourself space to be able to drill and then follow up with a rivet gun. I've made plenty of mistakes through this thing. I know it. The good news is that I don't think any of those mistakes are like earth-shattering. It's gonna be fine. It's just the first time I've ever done it. So it's not gonna be perfect. And that's another thing that's hard to kind of wrap your head around. All right, so what do we have left to do? These little things. I've been making these out of scraps. I'm learning to pre-drill these. Oh, another lesson. You're gonna go through drill bits. Like, especially if you're using 1/8". This thing is chewing through my 1/4" bits. So it's probably a good idea to take some time to just kind of pre-drill all of these and step your way up through your bits. Wear gloves. These things are full of these little burrs, right? I cut the hell out of my hand in a bunch of different places, right? It doesn't seem that bad, but it's literally the death of 1,000 cuts. Anyway, whatever. We need to get back to work. I'm gonna start by cutting and pre-drilling a bunch of these. Stuff like that is what gets you. For whatever it's worth, having those little brackets pre-drilled, world of difference. World of difference. I'm gonna do that for the rest of them too. All right, we got a little bit of concave, not much. So that should be all right. Level and level. Wow, okay, so everything's going as good as I think we have any right to expect. Now we're gonna start connecting these channels to the sides using those gussets.
Okay, so when it comes to actually installing these supporting brackets, there's kind of a technique that I've learned. And it goes like this. You got your pre-made pieces, right? There's your angle bracket with the holes already in it. Then you've got this chunk, which you know is going to fit underneath here. If you cut about 15 degrees off the back of this thing, it makes for, it accommodates the curve in the hull of the boat. But all you got to do is you take your chunk, right, line it up so that the bases are flush, and then clamp it. That's it. And you slide this in until you find a spot where it sits flush. Then you mark it. And that's where you know your hole has to be. And you grab yourself a drill with an appropriately sized bit for whatever rivet you're working with. And you drill that hole. Now, I like to come at it from both sides so I can open that hole up a little bit. All right, cool. And we'll dry fit to make sure the rivet slides in and out easily. Cool. Now, we're not going to rivet anything yet. We're going to go ahead, we're going to drill this. Still clamped up, nothing's changed. And this we are going to rivet right off the bat. All right, now we can take that clamp off. Slide this into place. Here's the hole that we made. There we go, right there. We're not going to pop that in yet because we want to make sure this edge is flush to the upper rail. Now, these don't have to be perfect, I don't think. But you can see how it gets snug here pretty easily, and you run out of space to use your tools. No matter what you do, you got to have space to be able to get that rivet gun into there. All right, so now this is in place, right? We can come in on this other side. Everything's flushed. We can drill through this side. Waller it out a bit. Grab your rivet. Slide it through. Grab your clamp. I have no doubt that that will hold my weight. I think I just placed the last rivet that I intend, at least the last rivet I know about. It's time to give this a little test, see what happens. Now remember, I'm 260 pounds. Here we go. Wow. I'm getting confident here. That's awesome. That 1/8 of an inch aluminum might have been a pain in the ass, but it's gonna do the job. So we've reached the phase of the installation that I have to admit I've kind of had a little bit of trouble trying to understand, and that's installation of the foam. The foam that you put into the boat is not going to increase the buoyancy of the boat under normal conditions where the boat is riding on the surface of the water. What the foam does is it stops your boat from sinking when your boat takes on water. So to think about how this works, I'm going to use an analogy. What I want you to imagine are two mason jars. One of them absolutely empty. The other one is full of packing peanuts. Which one of these two jars will hold more liquid water? This one. Why? Because so much of the volume of the one that's full of packing peanuts is already full of some other material. And it just so happens to be that that material is more buoyant than the water itself. You have an empty vessel. Will this float right now with a lid on it if I throw this in the water? Absolutely. It'll float and bob down the river and do all the things that you want it to do. But the second that the cap comes off and water gets inside of here, this sucker is going right
to the bottom of the lake. This one, assuming that all of the foam is glued in and somehow adhered to the inside of the structure, you can fill this up with water all you want, and you know what? It's never going to go all the way down to the bottom. Now, the rules on foam are actually enforced by the United States Coast Guard. There are certain specifications and all this other good stuff that you have to meet. Look, it involves a bunch of complicated math and all the, I'm going to stick with the rule of thumb. 1 cubic foot of foam displaces 60 pounds of weight when the boat is submerged. You got to think about the weight of your hull. You got to think about the weight of the motor. You got to think about the weight of the occupants, the weight of your gear, the weight of the materials that you're going to use, and all of that stuff goes together. Then you got to figure out enough cubic feet of foam to offset all of that weight so that in the event something horrible ever happens, you end up getting submerged, there's enough foam inside of your vessel to make sure that it doesn't all the way sink. But these are not the only benefits. Foam does other things for us as well. Foam can be structural. Foam can be a sound deadener. And if you're anything like me, you think about this and you say, hey, there's no particular way that the foam in this container has been arranged and it does the same job. Where is the best place for the foam to go? General consensus appears to be that the foam goes in the base of the hull for a couple different reasons. Number one, there's a whole lot of unused space down there that you're never going to be able to get to once that subfloor goes on. Number two, stiffens up the hull of the boat. When that foam goes in, it turns it into a solid mass. Much stronger, much less likely to give you all kinds of crazy vibration. It also helps with the structure for other areas of things that you build on top of the subfloor. And the third reason is sound deadening. If you ever been in an aluminum boat, you know that they make all kinds of weird noises with the bleeps and the bloops coming up from underneath the hull. We want to deaden that out a little bit. How much foam do we need for this boat? Let's go do some math. Okay, I hope you'll forgive me for getting a little bit nerdy, but I've never seen anybody else do one of these videos where they actually calculate the number of feet of foam that you actually need. The way you start is with your known weights. You can go ahead and, look at this, pause the video, look at specifics if you want to, but the bottom line is I need to get to a flotation for 1,242 pounds. Now, the rule of thumb that we're going to work with here is that 1 cubic foot of foam floats approximately 60 pounds, right? Submerged. If we divide 1,242, which is our target weight, by 60, that tells us that we need 20.7 cubic feet of foam. Cubic feet is kind of hard to work with. I'd prefer to work in cubic inches. So we convert cubic feet into cubic inches. 12 to the third power, it's length times width times height, 12 inches on a side, 1,728 inches. At the end of the day, you do the math and you figure out you need over 35,000 cubic inches of foam in order to achieve the goal for 1,242 pounds. So let's visualize the hull and what we've got so far. It's got all these nice round edges and all this other good stuff, but ideally what we've done here is give ourselves this nice little perfect 90 degree all the way down the length of the run, which if you remember was 118.5 inches. Now if you think of this, instead of being this curved shape, think of it as forming a rectangle, right? And when you draw this out, you can see that you're probably getting about 70% of whatever you would get by doing this easy math. So all I'm doing is I'm taking this 18-inch from the gunnel to where that channel starts, times a 5-inch rise, which is the average that you've actually got here. In some cases it's more, in some cases it's less, times the 118.5 inches for the full run. What you come up with when you do that is 21,922. Well, that's the number that you get if you have the full rectangle. So if we give ourselves the 70% adjuster, you end up with about 15,345 for each side. Now there's two sides and they're roughly symmetrical. That puts you at about 30,000 cubic inches, give or take, under the floor. Now remember, the goal that we were trying to get to was 35,000 cubic inches. We're only at 30. So there's an additional 5,000 square inches. That's 3 cubic feet of foam that's going to need to go somewhere. And this is why I left that whole channel up here in the bow wide open, is we're going to have the ability to just dump foam into that space, and we're going to get to exactly where we need to be with overkill. So yeah, wrapping it up. Step 1, understanding your weight. Step 2, applying your rule of thumb, doing your conversions, taking your measurements, trying to find the easiest way to guesstimate your math, do the calculations and make sure that you are meeting or exceeding whatever your projected number actually is. So we've kind of dealt with the mathematical mumbo jumbo. Now we're going to go ahead and install the barriers for the expanding foam that's eventually going to get put in. Severe weather is delaying that delivery, but we also have to accommodate for drainage. This is closed cell foam that we're going to be installing, which means it's supposed to shed water, but even if you're shedding water, it's got to go somewhere. I want to make sure that I'm channeling that water when it comes in down into the hull and doesn't get trapped up on top. Let's get to it. Okay, so this may be difficult to visualize. This is something that I saw Tiny Boat Nation do, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Each one of these boxes is going to be filled with 2-part foam. It's going to expand, it's going to come up to the top, and then once it's cured, we're going to cut the top off of it. And normally, what you see people do is they try to cut it off so that it's as flat as possible, flush with the tops of these rails. And that's great. But you're never going to get it cut exactly the right way. There's always going to be imperfections. There's always going to be little dips and valleys and nooks and crannies. And the issue with that is if water gets into your boat, if they're sealed off with foam, that water is going to get trapped before it has the chance to even try to cascade down. What if we avoided all that? What if we use that foam to create effectively a funnel? So this gets filled in and it's solid, bear with me. But then what we do is we shape the foam so that it drops, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 an inch down towards that hose. Now that hose, you cut it off, flush with whatever level you carved it down to. And yeah, you got a little gap, but that gap is now useful. It's a drainage. And as that water goes into that, it runs right back down here into the bilge so it can be collected at the back where the bilge pump is going to sit. And it's self-ventilating. I really liked it. I decided to use it.
I got some great news. Our foam showed up. I wasn't expecting it to. This is 2-part flotation foam from Total Boat. Great that it's here, but there's bad news too. And it's that I didn't do good math. One of these 2-gallon kits is enough to do one side of the boat. So I'm gonna need to order 2 more gallons to run 1 part of the resin, 1 part of the activator, mix them together into a container, pour that out. I'm gonna see if I can get every one of them poured in a single shot. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to mix a larger batch because I'm told that the more you use, the more of a reaction you're gonna get. This is a, I don't know, does it look like? This looks like it's probably a 2-quart container. We get basically 4 1-quart each batches out of this setup. I don't know that that's gonna be enough to, it better be. Anyway, we're gonna give it hell. $28. I don't know why I'm stopping at 28, because I'm a chicken. All right, 28, 28. Stir. Try not to throw the stuff everywhere. Okay, it's starting to go right now.
Well, that's expanding pretty good. No complaints. Followed the instructions. Everything went pretty well. I think I may have a little bit of a depression there that goes ahead of the lip, but I'm going to use that as my slope down towards that drainage tube. But this looks like cake. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with the way this is going so far. We're gonna have to go ahead and order some more expanding foam. We'll take care of that. It looks like our next step is gonna be shaving this stuff down, getting it level to where we want it to be, then putting a deck on top of this thing. So we've actually got an established subfloor. We'll catch that in the next one. Thanks for watching. I hope you got as much out of this as I did. Hit like if you think I did a good job, and subscribe if you want to follow along to see what else happens with the search and rescue utility boat. I promise I won't let you down.